Well, it is a law and order episode of Spotlight Now as we welcome in Chief Logan from the Honolulu Police Department, as well as Honolulu Prosecutor Steve Alm.
Yeah, we've got a lot of questions for both of these gentlemen about what crime is like in our community right now, what's working, what's not, and also a lot about the staffing challenges that both departments have faced.
Spotlight Now starts now.
Ryan Kalei-Suji and Yunji Denise on Hawaii News Now. Have questions or comments for our guests? Join the conversation in our Facebook live stream. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
And joining us now live here in studio is Honolulu Police Chief Joe Logan. Thank you so much, Chief, for joining us here this morning.
Thank you very much. Thanks to both of you for the opportunity.
You know, we want to start off just by congratulating you. You made it through 1 year in the position, so congratulations on that. Let's talk a little bit about what this year has been like for you in this role, some of the challenges and some of the things that you're continuing to work through.
So I enjoy getting up every morning, coming to work every day. I really enjoy the Honolulu Police Department and all the men and women that serve our communities. It's a great opportunity for me to give back to the community that really I've grown up for the last 52 years of living in the city and county of Honolulu. And so the men and women of the Honolulu Police Department are there every day, working 7 days a week, 365 days a year, to help keep Honolulu safe. And I've inherited a great leadership staff that is all about how do we help the police department continuing its mission. And so for me, it's rewarding, satisfying, and I enjoy getting up at 4:30 every morning, getting to work, exercising, do what I need to do to get my day started, and then get to work and solve problems.
You know, one of the major problems when you came on board that was identified was the staffing shortages that the police department has faced. We know that you've made some strides and had some strategies in place to try to recruit more officers, but then with the retention issues, you continue to have retirements. And so where are we in terms of recruiting right now?
So we're no larger or smaller than we were. We're still hovering around 390 vacancies, but that depends on when our officers come off the training phases that they go through and enter their first assignment. So those numbers would fluctuate on a quarterly basis. But more importantly, we have part of the strategic plan was to get how do we develop further recruiting. So we've increased or doubled the size of the recruiting staff, so they're out to more events. They're out there engaging with the communities and how they can recruit. We still have about 68 to 70 people retire every year. So I've got to recruit more than that. Right now, we've dropped the number of applications from about 6,000 prior to the pandemic to right around 2,000 the current year. Of that, we still hire about 100, 110 officers into the recruit program. But out of that, we will probably graduate 90 to 100 of those. And then they enter the field training program, and then the fourth watch, and then go on to their assignment. So anywhere in that category they can get in, they can finish the tour and become an officer, or if they have issues, concerns, or the officers feel that this person's not ready, then we may ask them to come back at a later time, and ask them to leave the program. And police work is not for everyone. It is a very demanding, a very tough job, and so we got to find the right people to do that. We also have what we call Police Services Officer Program. Those of us that are old timers know that as a cadet program. So we're looking at 18 to 20-year-olds, those that either coming out of high school or finished high school that maybe want an interest in the Honolulu Police Department. So they come in an internship program. We bring them on. We provide them things to do, learn about the police department, and on Fridays we'll send them to the police academy and kind of get them the same training they would if they were in the academy. And at that point, we're prepping them for becoming a police officer. Now they still got to pass all the entrance and those kinds of tests that are needed to be a police officer: the background, the psychological, the medical, and the physical. And we're also now doing that with the universities. So those are in their final year, final semester at maybe public administration or criminal justice. If they're interested in the Honolulu Police Department, we'll bring them in and see how we can work that same program.
You talked a little bit about just that recruiting process, but you also briefly touched upon some of the requirements to even get to the academy portion. And there are some who say that it is very difficult to pass some of the prerequisites to get to that point. Have there been any considerations to modifying some of the requirements that are needed to get to that phase in order to help expand the pool of applicants?
So because we're still hiring about 100, 110, we don't see that as an issue or concern now. It's really quality over quantity. We got to have the right people whose maybe internal moral compass is pointing toward true north. So how do we ensure that? And so that process, yes, is painful. It went down from 18 months to a year down to 3.5, 4 months, depending on you as a person and how you aggressively attack the various stages you have to come through. So what really is the trigger point for somebody not getting into the department at that stage is really the background check. So what decisions did they make prior to the application process that may hamper their ability to come into the program? And so really, that's why this cadet program is a way to help the 18 to 20, 21, 24-year-olds in a guidance way of allowing them or helping them not make those mistakes or those decisions that are going to prevent them becoming a police officer.
If you have basically the numbers are a wash, right, that you're losing a certain amount and then you're regaining these recruits, at some point, do we just have to accept that we have a smaller force, or are you still trying to get to that full staffing level, and how long will that take?
That I'm not sure. So I think we're in a cycle. The pandemic has changed society and working conditions. People want to work from home. People want to work social media influencers. They want to do something else. And there are still those numbers of people that want to do what I call brick and mortar, come to work every day, work in an office, work as a police officer, firefighter, emergency services person, or a prosecutor when Steve Alm comes in here. So to do that takes a certain person, right? And those people are still out there. So how do I attract them, right? And that's our recruiting, is doubling the size of recruit force. Our officers, our employees of the Honolulu Police Department are our best recruiters, because every day they're out there on the streets or out there with the communities. And how they behave and how they operate is how people will see this Honolulu Police Department and want to come work for us.
I want to get your statement and your thoughts on some news that recently broke with some of your officers, 4 officers arrested within a month for domestic abuse charges, investigations continuing on. Your thoughts, just as a leader of this department overseeing these officers, what have you learned, I guess, through this process, and what are some of the things that the department is doing to ensure safety for not only the officers but for families and other members that have been impacted by this?
No, absolutely. Anything above 0 is not acceptable, and our officers are allowed due process and presumed innocent until proven guilty by a court of law. And so, but we have had 4 officers. We've had 5 officers for the whole year. Under 8 different offenses. And so how do we as a department, what are we doing right or wrong to ensure that that doesn't happen? There's a lot of resources that we have. We have peer support. We have human services unit that it provides marriage and couples counseling for our officers. We have, to some extent, a financial counselor. I think we could do better in that aspect, because money is usually a problem if there's a trouble in the household. So how do we help with all of that? And it's our supervisors paying attention to our officers at all levels to understand when somebody comes to work and they're not the same, is to just ask, hey, how are you doing today? What's going on? How can we help you? And so really it's we as an organization need to take ownership of every officer when they come into work, or every employee for that matter. We take every allegation seriously. We're going to thoroughly investigate. There's a criminal side that's going on, and those cases will be brought to the prosecutor's office, and if they accept them, they will proceed with that, or the administrative side, which is our side, with our professional standards office looking at our officers, and we can either go from exonerating them from the allegations to a discharge based on the investigation that happens.
I want to ask you about guns. Since you came into your position, the laws have obviously changed, and Hawaii citizens can now carry guns, concealed weapons on them. Can you tell us a little bit about how many permits have been issued so far, and if you've seen any changes since this has come to pass?
So there's a little over 1,300 applicants, and I've signed off on almost 1,000 applications for license to carry. So there's 1,000 individuals out there that are allowed to carry a gun based off of Hawaii changing from a may state to a shall state based on the New York Bruin decision. And so because of that decision, issuing these things so far, knock on wood, we've none of those individuals that have a license to carry have either been in, there's been no cases having to do with sensitive places or being in violation of a gun crime, using their firearm in the commission of a crime. And so those are great statistics. I know there was a lot of worry and concern from the public, as there should be, because this is something brand new. So how do we help ease that? And I can tell you that, all of those gun enthusiasts that are out there are abiding by the laws and paying attention to what's going on. And I give them kudos for that.
Having said that, though, there have been some incidences where gun violence has been making headlines throughout a community. Is there any specific, issue with that you're seeing that maybe as a police chief that you're paying close attention to? Are we seeing more of a specific type of crime or threats to any community that may be gun related or not, but something that you're noticing a trend in what we're, in the calls that the department is getting?
Sure. I will tell you that the city and county of Honolulu overall crime is down. Crime is down anywhere between 15 to 40%, depending on which category you're looking at. However, in District 8 or the west side of the city and county of Honolulu, there have been several murders or homicides over and above what they've had before. And that's a concern. It's a concern for me that younger generation are using firearms more. There's a greater number of cases or in crimes involved with firearms. And it's this younger generation that's doing it. And so that's a great concern for me in the District 8, as well as it is for the commander that's out there. And so she's coming up with plans and ways to address that situation. So how can we as a department, working with our federal and state partners, help curb the violence? As you know, the state just had a gun buyback thing that happened. And so that's a great concern for me. The other one is this past weekend. We've had two gun-related incidents, both attempted murders and then one with a knife. One was domestic violence. The other two were incidents involving altercations. And so for the public's concern is that none of these cases were random, in that there's not somebody that's armed and running around just attacking people at random. These are cases where people have an altercation or some kind of relationship with another individual that's causing this crime not causing the crime, but part of the crime that's happening. And so how do we as a law enforcement get in front of that? Difficult, because what people do in the privacy of their own home is different. But if they're on the streets with guns, then how do we as a department proactively increase that? So we're running operations in various districts, not just with violent crime, but also property crime in hotspot policing. So we're using analytical data to determine where crimes are happening, what types of crime, what hours of the day, and then how do we, as a department and as a district command, provide them the resources or her to attack that crime problem in that hotspot and reduce the potential for further crime.
Yeah, following up on that, the District 8, the west side that you're talking about, what kind of measures can be taken to try to reduce some of those incredibly violent crimes?
So a lot of that is community engagement. What is the community willing to put up with? What is the community helping us to solve? So it's really a solutions base. So the administration, along with the department, the district command, and Major Beckley and her command, and how do we get to the communities to find out what is their take on what's going on and how can we help them? If you look at kind of the background around these crimes, while they're not gang related, they're organization related in that they're centered around criminal activity, whether that's gambling or chicken fighting and gambling game rooms, or narcotics and some other offenses. And so how do we help curb all of that, working with the community, because we can't solve it ourselves. We need the community's help.
Another area that often has a lot of attention because of just the amount of people there is the Waikiki area. And we're going to talk to Prosecutor Steve Alm about the Weed and Seed program, or the Safe and Sound program as it's known in Waikiki. Your thoughts about what things have been like in the area since the program has started, and just the overall police presence in Waikiki right now?
So I've had a conversation. I just came back from the major city chiefs. Several of those chiefs went to Honolulu on vacation, spent time in Waikiki, and they all came back and told me that it was immaculate. It was clean, it was safe. There was an abundance of people on the streets, and really that's what's safe and sound, and what District 6 is doing in Waikiki under Major Platt and all the efforts that they have going on in there to reduce crime. And so they're taking a proactive approach at fighting crime, and not just violent crime or felony crime. It's all crimes. And so by taking that posture of allowing no crime to go unsolved or unarrested, they're taking action in all of that. And so that has an impact on pushing crime out of Waikiki. Now criminals may go to another area, and so other district commanders are paying attention to what's going on and how can they curb that. But Safe and Sound is an awesome program that's working well. It's being able to take those criminals who continue to commit crimes within the Waikiki, and if the judge issues a geographic restriction, then they can no longer be in Waikiki. If they are spotted, then they're immediately arrested. And so that's a great program, and it's having positive impacts to Waikiki.
The legislative session is just around the corner. Hard to believe we are approaching the end of the year. One of the things we keep hearing a lot of buzz about is the potential legalization for recreational marijuana in our community. We are going to be talking to Steve Alm about this as well. He's written an editorial really talking about the dangers that he sees for the community. What are your thoughts about this and if this happens in our community?
So I'm anti-pro marijuana. How do we stop this from happening? Right now, there's nothing broken in the system. We've decriminalized marijuana, not myself, but the legislature and things. So it's now a citation. You don't get arrested for using marijuana. Even in those states that have legalized marijuana, you can't smoke marijuana in public. You can do it in private. You can do it out, somewhere else, not in the public view. And then you're high when you walk around. And so that's likely what's going on in the city and county of Honolulu today. Most people are not smoking right in general public. And because it's decriminalized, there's no issue or concern here that I think from a law enforcement perspective that we need to legalize marijuana. If the panacea thinks that we're going to get taxes and we're going to get all this other stuff from marijuana stores and all those other things, that's not going to happen. I think in those states, it might have been an initial jolt of tax revenues but the black market of illegal marijuana grows and selling is going to exponentially increase. And so people will be able to buy marijuana in a dark alley vice going to pay taxes for it in the streets. Now they have to, understand that when you do that, you're susceptible to other crimes if you do it in a black market. And those other cities and states have issues with foreign nationals coming in and growing marijuana on the black market. And so how do we ensure that that doesn't happen here in the city and county of Honolulu? We are a gated community. We're the most isolated landmass in the world. We're 2,500 miles away from everyone. So you'd think it should be fairly easy, but we got to make sure we're doing our due diligence. So I'm not sure what the legislature thinks they're fixing is a solution to fixing a problem that really doesn't exist.
Well, there seems to be a lot of support by many lawmakers, and this was a conversation that we've had in the past with lawmakers who are actually trying to push this forward. With the department taking this stance, are there any conversations that you are having or anyone in the department to talk to these lawmakers about your stance, about your opinions on this, maybe hoping that they'll take your side of this issue that really in a lot of ways has divided the community in something that this is something that needs to happen, others who are opposed. But are those conversations with lawmakers happening?
I've had a couple conversations with one senator and two representatives, but nothing formal in a sit down in their office to discuss this. But I plan to do that in the near future as we ramp up toward the legislative session. And I hope it's not a done deal yet. Somebody has already made the decision that we're going to do this. I know the Senate passed it last year, and the House didn't hear it, so they didn't pass it. And so how do we ensure that that's, although I think there's scuttlebutt on the street is this is done, it's going to happen. But really how are you going to pay for all the social ills that come with it, really? And who's going to bear that brunt of that payment? Is it going to be the taxpayers whose maybe medical bills are going to go up or something's going to go up because people have to offset the costs of all the problems that these other cities and states that have legalized marijuana are now paying for? So why go down that road in the first place?
And what kind of social ills do you foresee? Do you think that a lot of people who are not necessarily smoking marijuana now or ingesting it in some way will start to do that because it's legal? What is the concern there?
Well, because because alcohol is legal and cigarettes are legal for adults, does that mean that the children under 18 are not having access to it? They are. They are getting access in one way or another. So if we think that legalizing marijuana and saying only over 21 can buy, and we think that a 12-year-old is not going to be able to have access to that, it's not going to happen. It's almost impossible to stop that. We can limit it, but we're not going to stop it. The other part of that issue or concern is a 12-year-old who smokes dope weekly, when the age, psychologists are saying that the age of 26 is when your brain is fully matured, then that 12 to 26, what is that individual going to be? A productive member of society? Is he going to reach their full potential, or is it going to hamper that? Studies have shown that marijuana use, long-term marijuana use, has negative impacts to your brain, to your ability, and it curbs your potential to what you could be as an individual. And so, how do we ensure that all that doesn't happen? It's just a matter of there's no way for us to stop all of the ills. The other ills you're going to see is intoxication while driving, the number of motor vehicle collisions and serious collisions rose in all those cities and states that legalized marijuana, and then the hospital, the emergency room increased drastically in the number of people that were in the hospitals. And so how do we ensure that none of that happens? It's going to be, law enforcement is doing everything we can to protect society now, and then we add something else that's more on our plate. There's only so much we can do before something breaks.
Sure. And beyond just marijuana, we want to just talk about the larger picture as you kind of painted that picture of just the department's response to drug use and illegal drug use as a whole. At this point in time, where we're at, how would you gauge the department's handling of drug use and illegal drug use, because there still seems to be a lot of usage out there. We're seeing some instances as well with mental illnesses that also lead to some of these illegal drug uses. Do you feel confident with what the department is doing and doing right now to combat that? Or do you think that this is an issue that continues to get worse?
I think the Narcotics Vice Division is doing all it can to help curb the trafficking of illegal drugs into the city and county of Honolulu with our federal and state partners, working together collaboratively to help curb as much as they can. But can we stop all of it? I think we're doing a good job. We can do a lot better, but it's about resources. It's not about the efforts in trying. We're trying everything we can. We are focused right now on game rooms, and there's a lot of narcotics and illegal drug use and gambling going on around those game rooms. So that's one way to help curb it. But how do we shut down game rooms that are kind of a center for crime and drug use? And so that's one way to look at how we do that. Our federal partners are helping us with the infiltration of drugs through either airlines or mailing drugs into the United States or into the state of Hawaii, and more specifically city and county. So how do we curb that? And I think we're doing a good job. But my first year priority was pushing new officers that finished their training and entered the first watch into patrol. So now this second year, I'm going to focus more of a balanced approach at putting officers in narcotics in our criminal investigation divisions and in patrol so that we can help build those numbers up because they have taken some slide in the number of detectives and investigators, pushed them into patrol. So we need to push people back into those organizations.
I mean, the challenge, of course, goes back to where we started, which is the recruitment and retention issue. So given that you only have a finite number of officers, how do you find that balance?
It's interesting. It's talking to leaders and talking to what's working, what's not working, where the influence of either violent crime, and really looking at the strategic plan and how we want to shape the future of the city and county of Honolulu, whether that's socially, and then from the aspect using technology to help our officers. So maybe we don't need as many officers in certain areas of patrol because we have cameras and other things that can help us do that. And then with our federal partners and state partners, if they have increased numbers and capabilities, then maybe we don't need as much officers in there. So it's a delicate balance of looking at everything and then putting the resources in the right place.
On this issue of drug use, a few months back, there was just an alarming number of fentanyl cases that we were experiencing and seeing it throughout our community. The city council and the mayor signing into effect bills that would essentially try to help to counter that. What are you seeing right now with the department? Is this still an issue that is concerning? Has there been a drop down? And overall, how has this fentanyl issue really, where are we at right now with that?
I think there was a spike a couple months ago in fentanyl usage and unfortunately deaths and overdoses. That seems to have curbed right now. I haven't seen reports within my organization on fentanyl issues or concerns. I'm not saying it's not out there. Maybe the emergency services has handled most of those cases without law enforcement, but rarely if that would ever happen. So I think right now I'm seeing a lull in fentanyl usage, but I'm sure it's still ongoing. Maybe, why that is, I'm not sure, but hopefully it's aggressive enforcement by our federal and state partners doing what they need to do to help curb the fentanyl crisis. We know most of it is coming through the southwest border, through Mexico, and so how do we help curb that? We need our federal and state partners and our police departments along the border to help do what they can do to help curb that also.
It's surprising, but the half hour goes so fast. I want to ask you though, before we let you go, year one is done. When you talk about those reductions, 15 to 40% of crime reduction is just incredible. Yes. What are the issues that you want the public to be the most aware of? Especially, we know we're heading into the holiday season. It's always a time, of course, for crimes of opportunity. But more broadly, what concerns you the most, and what kind of engagement do you want from the public?
Well, I'd like the public, one is if you see something unusual, see a concern, please bring it to the department. If you have a solution to help us solve something, please bring that to the police department and we'd be happy to. More importantly, Honolulu is still one of the safest cities, if not the safest city within the United States. And so, yes, crime is down. Crime is down overall nationally, although there are pockets where cities have other issues and concerns and maybe homicides are on the rise. But I just want to assure everyone that Honolulu continues to be the safe community. It will continue to be the safe community in the future, regardless of the number of positions I have vacant. Our officers and employees are out there every day working diligently to, it hasn't curbed our operations ability, so we still continue to serve and do our mission of serving the people and keeping them safe.
Okay, Honolulu Police Chief Joe Logan, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. We're going to be back in just a moment with Prosecutor Steve Alm. Stay with us. Welcome back. Thanks so much for being here. We are joined now by Honolulu Prosecutor Steve. I want to start basically where the chief left off and talking about recruitment issues and retention issues. His office obviously facing a lot of issues there, and my understanding is yours as well.
I think we're like every other government agency, private practice. Everybody's a little short. And I think one of the challenges for us is when I came in January 2021, we were the lowest paid government agency as far as with lawyers. And so that has been a real important part of it. So I've worked with the mayor, he's been great, city council's been great. So they've been able to get a number of raises. So now we are competitive with all of the other agencies. We're competitive with some of the private practice opportunities. And we're the only place where you can really do a lot of good jury trial experience. So we're getting a lot of good new deputies, and I'm really happy with that.
One of the things that we were talking also with the chief was about the Safe and Sound program in Waikiki. This was something that was an important initiative of you when coming into this position. Having heard the success that the chief spoke about, what are your thoughts about where things are at, and do you see this time for future expansion in other areas? I know that personnel, as you said, is always an issue, but what more can be done to replicate what's happening there?
Okay, when I was the United States Attorney is when we did Weed and Seed for the first time in Kalihi in Chinatown. Tremendously successful. Crime down 70% in 4 years. Then it went to Waipahu and Eva Beach. So I always thought if I could ever get back in the position to do it, because when I left, the weed part kind of died out. Seed kept on going. So I really thought if we could do it again. And so they were very busy with the coordinators there. So we got a new name, went to Waikiki, same strategy, but we're still doing the other 3 sites. And it just gets heightened cooperation between the police department and the prosecutors and the public. And so even with crime down 70% in Kalihi and Chinatown, it also meant a new Head Start program. It meant an after-school program for kids because that's what the community needed. So in Waikiki, the first year has pretty much been law enforcement, the safe part of it. And as you heard from the chief, crime is down in all these areas. I think the only area it went up in is disorderly conduct. But I think that's a good thing because that means if people are making trouble and acting out, they're getting arrested. So there are consequences for behavior. And it's really important. I think the strategy can be worked in other communities. Right now, we are so busy with the current ones because it leads to more cases. We have clerical people voluntarily coming in at 6 o'clock in the morning to help process the cases. And in every single case now, this is something new since I was with the office before, body-worn cameras. The footage is extremely helpful, but it has to be reviewed before arraignment in every case. So that means between 6 o'clock in the morning and when they go to court later that morning. Every single case. You could have a disorderly conduct case with 3 officers there. You got to review all of it.
Wow, and given the shortages that we're talking about, what is the backlog right now?
Oh, it's not. These are handled. Most of the cases are misdemeanors, petty misdemeanors. They are handled that day in court. And when we first started, one of the real successes last time, 20 years ago, was the geographic restriction. When we first started in Waikiki, well, Chinatown first, then Waikiki, we were not getting any success getting the judges to issue the geographic restriction. And in our position, if you're causing trouble in an area, you don't have the right to be there. And there's something about that area that maybe causes you to get involved in crime. There are lowlifes there. Your friends who are criminals are hanging out there. There's a lot of stuff going on. So I was vocal about it. The mayor was, the city council chair was. And ever since January, the judges are granting geographic restrictions much more often. And that's one of the successful keys to success there.
And just to clarify, is that geographical restriction limited to Waikiki, or is that also in Chinatown?
There is one in Chinatown, and it's the Chinatown area. It's if a judge grants it, first they have to put them on probation and make that a condition of probation that you can't go back into that area. And it only lasts as long as the probationary period would be. So for a petty misdemeanor, it's 6 months. For a full misdemeanor, it's a year. So in Waikiki, it would apply to the whole Waikiki area. For Safe and Sound Waikiki, we also expanded it to include Diamond Head. So if folks were being arrested, maybe some of the homeless folks involved in crime, we didn't want them just going further up the slopes of Diamond Head to get past the boundary, which they would figure out, which was by Hawaii School for Girls. Now the entire Diamond Head is included, but it's pretty much for that.
I want to ask you about the Sariara case. That was the case involving the young woman who died on Kapiolani Boulevard after being hit by someone who, reportedly had multiple charges. But not talking about this case specifically, but you said after that you were going to pursue much harsher penalties for these repeat offenders. What has come of that?
And we are doing that. And what that means is we're not. It caused me to really look very closely at what we're doing in traffic court and what's happening. And we can't base our work and our requests based on what we think the judges are going to do. And so what we're doing now is no more deals on excessive speeding cases. For multiple no-fault, multiple driving without license cases, we're going to ask for jail. Where that has translated in is on a third offense, if we're going to ask for jail, that means they have to get offenses 1 and 2 on their record. And the judges are cautious. They refer them to the public defender, so they get to talk to them about it. So it's a counseled plea for 1 and 2. So that means arraignment courts are busier. It means we're going to trial more. And I know some people have complained about that, not in our office, but in public defenders or the courts. But that's what we all get paid to do. And we're hoping if people know you get multiple no faults, you get multiple driving without licenses, you are thumbing your nose at the rest of society. And we're going to be asking you to do some time in jail with a deterrence. We don't want to do it. We want people to get their licenses, to get insurance. And if they can't, don't drive until you're able to do that.
We want to touch upon an issue that we also had a discussion with the chief on, and that is, the legalization of marijuana as lawmakers are preparing to head back into session and consider that happening here in Hawaii. You've stated your opinion on this, that you are against it. What are some of the reasons why you feel like this is not the right fit for Hawaii?
Well, when I was a U.S. attorney, when I was the judge, we focused on meth and cocaine and alcohol because people's lives are being ruined from that. But when I saw that it had passed a few months ago, we started doing research into this. And you have other states like Colorado that have 10 years of experience. We discovered they have increased car crashes. They have increased emergency department visits. You have environmental problems. It's almost every area is a problem. And the reason is the weed today is so much stronger than it was back in the day. Back in the day, when maybe legislators remembered back to their high school days, 3% THC, that's the active ingredient in marijuana. Now you go to a marijuana store, it's 20, 30, 40% with concentrates over 90. But the two things the folks in Colorado, one brought up with me was, if you do this, you will change the character of your city forever. There are more weed stores than McDonald's and Starbucks combined in Colorado. And I want to keep Hawaii, Hawaii. The second part of it came as a total shock to us. The visitor industry, particularly those folks that work with Japanese tourists, Korean tourists, other Asian tourists, say, if we legalize marijuana here, the Japanese tourists will stop coming. That's an existential threat to the economy of our state. Ted Kubo, who runs JTB, president of JTB, pre-pandemic, they would bring in 500,000 tourists a year. He said they will stop coming. And so I cannot believe the legislators would want it on their watch that they legalize what is now a totally different drug, a much more dangerous drug, and caused us to have maybe a mortal wound to our tourist economy.
I think economy is what's driving a lot of this conversation right now. There is this allure of quite a bit of tax revenue. How do you respond to that?
Because when we looked at that, we think it's illusory. Because in Colorado, they did a study. For every dollar in tax revenue, there's $4.50 when you add up the emergency department visits. You add up the fatal car crashes. You add up the more kids dropping out of school. But it's, and it's a difficult issue because for some adults, it is recreational. For many other people, it's not. Teenagers are going to the emergency room. They think they're going crazy because the marijuana they smoked is so much more powerful. And the black market grows in every state where you legalize it. Because if you're trying to make tax money on it, it's going to cost more. People are going to buy from other than these licensed dealers. Now, this doesn't affect the medical marijuana, folks. We have that in place right now. If people have any sort of pain, other issues, they can go to a medical marijuana store and get it. So I echo what the chief said. The system is not broken. Let's not fix it with something that's going to screw up our economy, screw up our kids. Superintendent Keith Hayashi said they've got third graders vaping. Kids are behind in school based on the pandemic. The last thing they need is more available, another drug to hurt that.
And the same question that I asked the chief, have you had these conversations with the leadership in the House or the Senate or any lawmakers to sway them in some ways and to make your position known?
Well, when I called Jerry Gibson, who's general manager at the Marriott, and he is totally concerned about this. So he voluntarily gave us a ballroom to have an event on this. We invited tourist officials, we invited law enforcement, we invited bankers, and we invited all of the legislators. 3 showed up. So we are trying to work with them. We are trying to, I'm having meetings with them. We're going to try to convince them. Take a look at the research. Do your own research. Call JTB. Call Japan Airlines. Call Expedia, which is hotels.com. Ask them what they think, and they will tell you Japanese tourists will stop coming. I think families from the mainland will stop coming, or other places, because they want to come to a wholesome environment. The military is scared of this. You get kicked out of the military for one positive test of marijuana.
I'm interested to know, though, do you think that this is sort of a foregone conclusion? We did, as the chief noted, we saw it pass the Senate. It didn't get taken up in the House, but it does seem like there is more momentum incoming than in years past.
I think because they haven't really looked at it. I don't think this is a dead issue at all. We are going to win this fight. I think when the legislators know that they could kill a significant part of our economy, I don't think they want to have their name attached to it. I don't think Governor Green does either. The system is not broken. Do the research. I encourage them. Do your own research. You just Google it. I don't think you can go a week without a negative article in one of our local news stations or CNN or JAMA about problems with marijuana. It's a stronger drug. It causes that many more problems. And back in the day, teenagers could smoke it. It wouldn't cause a problem. But now when it's so strong, it really does retard their growth. It retards IQ. It's not good socially for kids. And I think that's part of the problem, that there's a lack of understanding, a lack of research. And I think if the legislators would do that, I think they'd say, let's not do this. And certainly not do it now when our economy is more precarious than ever.
Would you say that this would be the number one priority as we head into the legislative session that you're going to be advocating for? Or what are some of the other things that you may be going to lawmakers for? Because we know that with the way that Hawaii is structured in the legislative process, you only have 6 months to kind of get things changed with any rules. What are some of those priorities?
Well, it's one of those things that you can actually control. I mean, we will work with the police department. We'll work on all of the safe and sound areas, weed and seed areas. We'll try to reduce crime, hold people accountable. Often as prosecutors, you're there after the train wreck. So you're holding people accountable. But the more we can prevent crime, the better. Another issue I'm very concerned about is the judiciary is not taking felony probation seriously. And they're both at the same time being more lenient. So now you test positive for meth, you walk out of the office. There is no immediate consequence. You miss an appointment, no immediate consequence. You eventually run away, get picked up on a warrant, and then many times you're sent to prison. So at the same time it's too lenient, it's also too punitive, because people on probation can be successful. We know from efforts like Hope Probation that we looked at it. Women who were in Hope failed at probation and went to prison fully 50% less often than if they were in regular probation. Native Hawaiians, 42% less often. So we have a model that works. It's been abandoned at the legislature. They've never given a good reason why. And this is something we could fix tomorrow. They're in pretrial and in parole. So we've got to be smart about crime. There are about 3 times as many people on felony probation as there are in prison. So that's where you've got to stop it. Stop people from going to prison to begin with. And that will help a lot of ours. They go to prison half as often if they're in a program like HOPE than in regular probation.
I want to ask you about a case that's made a lot of headlines. That's the Juan Barone murder case.
Yep.
Just to catch people up to speed, there's a deputy who was disciplined who was let go for showing some photos and documents from that case in some of the presentations to help against elder abuse. Tell us a little bit. The defense attorney for that case has made a lot of headlines saying he wants the case thrown out or given to another office. What's your response right now?
Anytime there's misconduct, you're going to look to see, was it a one-time deal or multiple times? Did the person bring it to their supervisor's attention? Did they take responsibility for their actions, or did they try to blame others? So in this particular instance, the deputy was terminated. We are confident we will be able to persevere in court with not having the case dismissed and with our office continuing to prosecute it. It will be one more element of pretrial publicity voir dire. This is something the courts are used to doing. I did it a bunch when I was a judge. It means bringing anybody who's heard of the case, you bring them in one at a time into the courtroom, and the judge asks a series of questions. Have you heard of this case before? And then if they say yes, from what sources? Like HNN or the Star Advertiser. And then they say, well, what do you remember about it? Then did you talk to somebody else about it? Did you hear about it from somebody else? Did you form any opinions about it? If you did, were they such that if the judge instructed you, could you set them aside? That is what happens in every high-profile case. So if they were able to pick a jury in those 2 cases on the North Shore murder cases, in the Kathy Kealoha case, if they were able to pick a jury on that, they'd be able to pick a jury in this. It's not that, publicized that it can't be cured by pretrial publicity voir dire.
I want to ask about, we had Chief Logan here, and I just wanted to ask about the relationship and the dynamics that exist between you, the police department, and the mayor, the city and county of Honolulu. At times in the past that we've seen some disagreements from the leadership in these positions, and just the way that things have sort of panned out when it came to even investigations that required, the police to be involved, or for your department to investigate the HPD as well. Given all that, you all have been in the position for some time now.
Yeah.
How would you describe the overall relationship between everyone?
I really think the relationship is excellent. I can't think of a time where the governor, the mayor, city council, police chief, prosecutor have gotten along. Because my number one job running for this office was restoring trust in that office. I had started there. My wife had started there. With all of the problems they were having, that's what led me to run, is restoring trust there. And that means being independent. So we get along great with the police. I'm supported by the police union, as well as I get along really well with the brass, because they know we take our job seriously. They may not always agree with it, but we're independent. We're not subject to corruption. We're going to do the right thing. And like I said, the mayor's been really good. The governor's been good. We all get along really well. I think it's really, the winners are the city and county of Honolulu.
We talked to the chief about the rates of crimes, and he did say that across the board they are seeing a large decline. What are the areas that concern you most right now?
Well, and it's true. If you ask the person on the street, they'll say crime's up. But it's down in Hawaii like 30%. I mean, for the last 30 years, the numbers are about half what they were in the 90s. What concerns me most, and the murder rate actually is lower this year so far, and you don't want to botchy this, right? We're 3/4 of the way through the year. It's lower. The scary part is, out of the 14 murders so far, and last year there were in the 20s, 6 of them were on the Waianae Coast. And so that is something that really gets everybody's attention. And in many cases, people knew each other, which is no excuse for it. But people are using guns too often. If they're going to fight, but don't use guns, because that can lead to, even more problems. But the message to any 16 and 17-year-olds, and hopefully they're watching Spotlight, if they commit a murder, in all likelihood, they're going to get waived and tried in adult court, and if convicted, go to prison for life. It's real. You do an adult crime, you're going to do the adult time. And often it's done in a spur of the moment. So I would encourage parents, lock up any guns that are in your house. Keep them away from other people. That will prevent suicides. That will prevent little kids from playing around with and shooting another little kid. And I think that really concerns us. And we're going to try to meet with the chief. We're doing whatever we can, think of some strategies to try to reduce the gun violence on the Leeward Coast and all over the state.
Another perception maybe by the public, not only is crime up, but drug use is up. There's always concern that there is a lot of illegal drug use going on within our community. I know that this is something that you had focused on and talked about when running for this office, about not only penalizing those individuals, but getting them help. And that has been one of the cornerstones of what some of the things you're trying to do. Having been in this position for a few years now, how have you seen things change on the streets with drug use and also with the court system?
Well, it's called the 80-20 rule. 20% of any group consumes 80% of the product. And that's true with alcohol. That's why they sell in six-packs, That's true with drugs. And it's hard to avoid the criminal justice system when you have a drug problem, which is why it's so important for the judiciary. Excuse me, that's why it's so important for the judiciary to do probation right, because those folks are going to end up on probation. And like in Hope, they tested positive 73% less often than on regular probation, because there would be an immediate consequence for any drug use. So that really is important. When we've started a program to try to help homeless guys who are arrested, like in Chinatown, to get into treatment, because I bet almost 100% of the homeless folks sleeping on the sidewalk in Chinatown have a mental health problem or a drug problem or both. We can arrest them, get them into treatment, but when they get out of treatment, if they start using and there's no consequence, they're going to go back to the street. So the leverage of the criminal justice system, which I really learned as a judge, and I was the toughest sentencer in the courthouse, which made it easier for me to do different kind of programs. But that system can really help with a solution, and I wish they would do more along those lines. And we have a selfish reason at the prosecutor's office. People like in Hope Probation are arrested for new crimes 55% less often than on regular probation. So that means we're having to charge people that would not be charged otherwise. They wouldn't be committing the crimes otherwise. So the leverage of the criminal justice system can be really helpful. And that's one of the things when people say, oh, it should be treated as a medical issue or a health issue. The dirty secret there is if you ask somebody there, do you want to go to treatment? The answer would be no. You ask a guy on the sidewalk in Chinatown, do you have a drug problem? No. Do you want to go to treatment? No. Leave me alone. Do you want to go to a shelter? No. There are too many rules. So, I mean, the leverage of the system will get people into court, and then it'll get them into treatment and help them stay sober. And that's what we want to do for them to not only get off the street, but stay off the street.
On this particular issue, we always hear about a lack of resources. Are there enough resources for places for your office to send those folks?
I really wish, and that's a great point, I really wish the legislature would set up a funding source for our treatment programs for several years, because if they knew more people were coming, they could expand. But they're not going to expand based on the fact that maybe this year they'll get more money for treatment, but not next year. And so we really want the courts to send more people to treatment, but then monitor them correctly. And I think getting more mental health beds, more drug beds are important. We're working with the Judiciary and the Department of Health on a diversion program for the seriously mentally ill, which could have great potential in the future, and it's great to work with them on that.
Our time is almost up, but we also want to ask you about your future. We're coming up on an election year coming up. Your thoughts about what you've done in this position and your future plans in this role.
Well, I've really been pleased. There are a lot of great people in that office, and it was unfair to the vast majority because there was this cloud of corruption hanging over the office. And yet most people are going to work every day doing their job, which is just great. So I'll have an official announcement in the spring, but everything is going really well, and it would be great to continue it.
That's a good tease. All right. Prosecutor Steve, thank you so much for bringing us up to date. We really appreciate your time today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei-Suji. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders and taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, a packed show with two guests. We call it the Law and Order show, as we were able to really dive deep with Chief Logan as well as Prosecutor But going back to some of the statements, I think one of the overlapping things that we heard is a resistance to a possible legalization of marijuana from both of them.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because behind the scenes, you talk to lawmakers right now, there is a lot of momentum on this issue. There are lawmakers who have been really trying to legalize marijuana for recreational purposes in our community for a number of years. They almost got there last session, but they did not. It sounds like this session things are progressing at a rapid clip, but then you heard from both of these gentlemen today that they see a lot of potential dangers.
Yeah, and we also heard from both of them about the staffing issues. Of course, this is something that is not confined to just this department or these two departments. This is something that we're seeing throughout the community, just the overall shortage of workers. You know, Chief Logan saying that it continues to be a high priority of the department. He also noted, though, that with about 60 to 7 retirements happening each year, that is something he has to make sure that is a priority, that the department is ensuring that they are getting enough candidates and applicants, but also confident in the system that they have set up to sort of weed out those who are eligible and who are qualified enough for the position. But sounds like he is continuing to move forward as that being a priority after being in the office for 1 year.
Yeah, and we also heard from both of them about their concerns for the Leeward Coast and the number of violent gun crimes that we've seen there in recent months. The chief saying that he's going to step up his efforts in District 8 and try to do some specific outreach, especially to reach young people. And you heard the warning there from Prosecutor Steve to young people that, you know, if you are involved in a dangerous offense, that you will be tried as an adult and that there are some very serious consequences. So really interesting to hear from both of them. The good news overall is that crime is down.
Yeah, and that was something that they think that they both said is the perception of the community is that crime is up, but both reiterated that, you know, through statistics and through research that they are seeing the significance of the drop in crime in the overall city and county of Honolulu, which is great news. But they continue to push for programs like the Safe and Sound program in Waikiki, which has found success, as well as, you know, what's happening in Chinatown and the Weed and Seed program there. You heard from the prosecutor, as he said, they look to expand those efforts moving forward. On Tuesday, next week Tuesday, we are kind of doing a different type of show here on Spotlight Now.
Yeah, this is so exciting. We have a partnership with Kamehameha Schools. We've got some students who are coming in to host the show. They're bringing their own topics, their own questions, and their own guests, and they have some really compelling interviews for us.
Yeah, we got a chance to talk to them. They're going to be focusing primarily on just mental health issues as well as overall food sustainability issues that they felt are important to them. And so we look forward to that conversation. Again, we want to thank everybody for tuning in and remind everyone that you can continue to stay connected with us through not only watching us here live on television, but also online through the digital platforms of Hawaii News Now, and entering your questions for any of our guests throughout our show as we try to get in as many comments and topics in as possible. We leave you here on this Tuesday afternoon with a beautiful shot of the Honolulu skyline. You can see Diamond Head out there in the distance. Mahalo for watching. We'll see you back here next week.
Aloha.